Middle East is the only region on Earth where the three continents meet: Europe, Asia, and Africa. Though the precise geographical definition of Middle East is rarely agreed upon, but the following areas come under it: Lebanon, Palestine, Egypt, along the eastern seaboard of Mediterranean, Syria and Jordan, Iraq and Iran bordering the Persian Gulf, and the Arabian Peninsula state of Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, Dubai, and the UAE and Kuwait. Israel is accustomed to be the odd one out in the Middle East geographical definition. In the beginning of the 20th century, the governments of great powers of Europe showed no special interest in the Middle East. As long as shipping passed through its water uninterrupted, pilgrims made their way unmolested to their holy places, and a growing volume of oil flowed from its wells in the Gulf, they were by and large content. The Turkish Ottoman Empire, with its ancient capital of Constantinople, had dominated the Middle East for 400 years. Though since the emergence of Russia as a major power, Ottoman power considerably declined. By 1900, it had lost almost all its possessions in Europe to the Western powers. Shortly before World War I, the Ottoman Empire was left with, roughly speaking, modern states of Turkey, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. The eventual demise of the Ottoman Empire was brought about by its decision to join the First World War on the side of the Central Powers that was comprised of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Bulgaria. It culminated in the signing of the armistice on 30th October 1918 with the defeated Ottomans. According to Mick Jackson's award-winning film, Threads, made in 1984, whose principal assumptions was the Third World War would be sparked by events in the Middle East, is becoming alarmingly valid today. If you look at the roots of their conflict in the Middle East, which had started right from the collapse of Ottoman Empire and is still existing today, rather culminated into a more tense form. The background of this conflict dates as far back as the Romans, when the Jews were driven from Palestine in 70 AD and 135 AD as a result of their rebellion against their Roman rulers. Roman soldiers crushed both revolts, destroyed the city of Jerusalem, including Jewish temple, and expelled most of the Jews. Many thousands of Jewish people fled to neighboring countries, and over the next 200 years, they settled in almost every part of the Roman Empire, particularly in southern Europe. The Jews thus became a scattered people, and only a few thousands remained in Palestine. Many of these dispersed Jews became merchant bankers, and some became wealthy and gained important positions in the government of new land where they lived. However, they were often persecuted, as majority of people living in these areas were Europeans. Therefore, they forced Jews to live in separate areas. Also, they were not allowed to wood or buy lands. This persecution increased on the 14th and 15th century. Many Jews were expelled from Western Europe and settled in Russia and Poland. In the 19th century, these Jews were mostly populated in Russia. In 1881, the Tsar Alexander II was assassinated, and the Jews were blamed for this. As a result, they were persecuted in large number. This persecution was termed as pogrom. Many thousands were killed, their houses and synagogues were burned down. In order to escape persecution, many of the Jews fled to Western Europe and USA. Even there, they were not treated well and were suspected of being untrustworthy. This attitude towards Jews came to be known as anti-Semitism and had paved way for the origin of Zionism. By the beginning of the 20th century, many Jews dreamt of a state of their own. They gained this idea from a book called The Jewish State, published by Theodor Herzl in 1896, who gave the idea of a separate state where Jews could live on their own. Already at the Basel Congress in 1897, the delegates of the Jewish community had demanded a Jewish state in Palestine, which they considered to be the Promised Land. That is, the land of Palestine which Jews believed God had promised to them, where they had lived 2,000 years before. At the same time, Arabs living in Palestine also believed that Arabs needed a homeland. By 1914, at the time when World War I broke out, the two sides, Arabs and Jews, had the claim on Palestine. Therefore, this led to the emergence of discord between these two parties. During World War I, the situation turned in favor of Jews when the British government faced hardship in fighting with Germany. they wanted US to support in this war. British government believed that US Jews were empowered to influence the US government. That's why the British government declared its support for the Jewish homeland in Palestine. The support was declared in the form of a letter to Lord Rothschild by a Jew leader, British Foreign Secretary, in November 1917, who was known as Arthur James Balfour. In this letter, the support for a Jewish homeland was declared, but it also emphasized the importance of safeguarding the rights of Arabs as well. It must be noted that the British expressed their support for a Jewish homeland, not a state. But many Jews regarded this declaration as a promise from the British government for a setup of a Jewish state. This declaration came to be known as Balfour Declaration of 1917. On the other hand, British also made an agreement with the Arabs known as McMahon-Hussein Correspondence. It was a lengthy correspondence between Sir Henry McMahon, the British Consul General in Egypt, and Hussein, the Grand Sharif of Mecca. Since the Grand Sharif's relation with the Ottomans were not very cordial, McMahon found an opportunity to persuade Hussein to join the Allies against Ottoman. This move was a great success for the British in 1916. Arabs under the leadership of Hussein's son Faisal, in coordination with T.E. Lawrence, popularly known as Lawrence of Arabia, blew up Turkish trains and disrupted the flow of military supplies to the Turkish soldiers. This action came to be known as Arab Revolt. The Arabs believed that due to their assistance to the British in this war against Ottoman, they will be awarded complete self-government and independence from the Turks, but their expectations were shattered when they got to know about the secret agreement between France and Britain in 1916 to carve up Turkey's Arab areas after the war and share them out between themselves. This agreement came to be known as Sykes-Picot Agreement. The Sykes-Picot Agreement was signed due to certain factors. Number 1. To strengthen its position in Europe against Germany in the war, Britain wanted French support. That's why it decided to share Arab lands with France. Second, Middle East had trade links with both Britain and France, which they did not want to lose. Number 3. Suez Canal was the main trade route in Middle East, which Britain and France wanted to have control of. They jointly owned it, therefore wanted to maintain their power and influence in the Middle East. Now the post-war settlement will be discussed in my next video. Keep watching and stay tuned.